Hello, Graniopteryx here, and today I'm going to be talking about a little problem with Hollywood and the mainstream media. Meanwhile, I have to explain to newcomers to this channel that my computer ran out of memory a few days ago. I'm not that good about cleaning up, and deleting duplicate files and that sort of thing. I just don't have time. I'm looking after 2 horses and making all these videos. How much time does a woman have? Anyway, while my computer is out of action, I'm making these episodes on a 2012 Mac PowerBook. It turns out that a 2012 Mac PowerBook has about the same ability to handle the complexity of my 2022 video editing software as I would have when faced with the prospect of driving around London now with a map printed in the 1950s. So, while I wait for the nice computer man to come round with more memory, with any luck that'll be this afternoon, I'm stuck with audio only. Believe me, my little computer has enough problems with just the audio. So, I'm going to be talking about an article from Rolling Stone, not a publication generally associated with Jewish issues, I think you'll agree. But here we are with this headline from January the 13th, discussing an incident on the very last day of September last year. It may seem a little peculiar that they left this story hanging around for 4 months, but I have my theories which I might get to further down the line. Now, here's the rather startling headline. "Where are the Jews?" it blares, and then "Scandal erupts at the Academy Museum." It occurs to me that it's odd, but generally it takes somewhat less than 4 months for people to perceive an eruption. Those good citizens of the Roman town of Pompeii were aware of the eruption of Vesuvius within 15 minutes of its eruption in 79 AD. But that's Rolling Stone for you, reporting on a 4-month-old eruption. And what sort of eruption was it, you may well ask? I shall let Rolling Stone explain. But before that, as a very kind subscriber reminded me, I really should make more of an effort to ask you to hit that like button and to check that you're subscribed as well. Automated unsubscribing seems to be a particular problem with YouTube, and so you've got to keep an eye on them. And that's just YouTube. The others seem okay. And remember, Graniopteryx, that's me, is also on Rumble, BitChute and Minds.com. So please subscribe, like and share, whatever the platform. Now, before I get back to Rolling Stone, I want to mention, I have to mention canaries in coal mines. You must know that once upon a time, before technology developed gadgets to detect harmful gases trapped in underground tunnels, miners would carry a canary in a cage. Since birds are more susceptible to low oxygen levels, they would fall off their perch long before the miners would be able to perceive there was a problem. So, as soon as the canary landed on the floor of that cage, the miners would back off in a hurry. Well, many social commentators have likened Jews to that canary. That is, when something's going wrong in society, it seems that society turns on its Jews first, and so we can regard outbreaks of serious anti-Semitism as a sign that there's trouble ahead. Because, of course, it might start with Jews, but it never stops there. Myself, I'm more inclined to think of outbreaks of anti-Semitism not in terms of canaries, but in terms of a fever. You may have a high temperature, but that's just the outward sign, isn't it? It's not the disease itself. And in this instance, from Rolling Stone, if we have any real need to prove that there's a general sickness among the wokerati and that Hollywood is one of the engines of wokism, then this article just about clinches it. 4 months after the new cultural centre's splashy opening, big donors and showbiz veterans wonder why many of Hollywood's founding fathers are absent from its exhibits. And this is accompanied by a picture of the new Academy Museum. This is the front-end view, and this is an aerial view. Now, perhaps they're not very good pictures, but I reckon this building is absolutely hideous. The front looks like a giant tube of lipstick stuck on the front of an IKEA outlet, while this aerial view here shows that in the back garden there's another structure appearing not to have any real pictorial connection with the building at the front, and looking like a gigantic glass version of Boba Fett's hat. And the whole thing is absolutely massive. Just look at the cars next to it. Why am I talking about overblown architecture and not Jews? Well, because I think the two subjects are related. I think, it was Northcote Parkinson who pointed out that when institutions get bloated, top-heavy and decadent, they start devoting more of their resources to stuff that looks good instead of stuff that makes the business actually work. That's just before they collapse altogether. Rather like that bubble in the museum's back garden, actually. One day that thing is going to just pop like any other bubble would. And quite soon, I'd say, judging by this Rolling Stone article that I don't seem to be able to get started on. To continue, well, there was a big party at this official opening, and we might notice that all the participants, the same ones who were telling everyone to mask up, were partying like it was 2018. So far as I can see from this report, no one was arrested, and no one was told off, and no one seemed to mind. On September the 25th, the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures held its opening gala. Oh, it wasn't the very last day, it was 5 days before. Apologies. Held its opening gala with a starry guest list that included Lady Gaga, Brad Pitt, Nicole Kidman, Queen Latifah. Oh, I'm not going through all of this. It was a moment long in the making, given that planning of the Renzo piano-designed Mecca celebrating the history of film first began back in 2005 and was delayed by the rise of the COVID pandemic. I don't see how you can say it was delayed by COVID if it began in 2005. They had 15 years to get their act together before then. No, I think it was most likely bureaucratic squabbling, and that should give us a clue to all the rest. Though eyebrows were raised by the fact that the A-list revellers mingled maskless inside the 33,000 square foot space on Wilshire Boulevard at a time when celebrities were publicly chastising those who ignored COVID precautions. Oh, hypocrisy much. To continue, a much bigger controversy was brewing. Donors and influential Academy members, many of whom already had received private tours, were outraged that Hollywood's origin story, wherein a group of mostly Jewish émigrés fled persecution in their home countries to create what would become a multi-billion-dollar American-led industry, was conspicuously absent. Anti-Defamation League CEO Jonathan Greenblatt, who was on hand for the gala, was immediately struck by the lapse. I would have hoped that any honest historical assessment of the motion picture industry, its origins, its development, its growth, would include the role that Jews played in building the industry from the ground up, he says. As I walked through, I literally turned to the person I was there with and said to him, "Where are the Jews?" The omission was glaring. That sentiment is being echoed from Hollywood's C-suites to the halls of academia. It's sort of like building a museum dedicated to Renaissance painting and ignoring the Italians, says Hollywood historian and Brandeis University professor Thomas Doherty. Okay, to ignore the original Jewish development of the Hollywood movie industry would require some concentration, I'd say, and, as I also say, a bad sign. Instead of tributes to those old Hollywood pioneers, the dozen-plus exhibits that would open to the public 5 days later, 5 days, so it was the last day in September, included more contemporary skewing fare, such as director's inspiration Spike Lee and installation Pedro Almodovar. Nope, never heard of him. And behind the scenes, a full revolt was afoot, sources say, with some patrons threatening to pull future support for the institution. Says one prominent Academy member, who declined to be named. That's significant, you know. "You left the museum with the impression that the film industry was created 10 years ago. They erased the past." One Academy member, Ryan Kavanagh, pointed out that at the time they were starting Hollywood, Jews couldn't get bank loans, they couldn't own homes in LA, and yet they still created this industry that's the bedrock of the LA economy and touches people around the world. Instead of look at what they were able to do, it's just wiped out. It goes against everything that our industry says they stand for. Now, in that, Kavanagh has said a whole world of reasons. First of all, he's pointed out that the early Jews of Hollywood were among the least privileged and the most ostracized of American citizens, and yet for all that, they made a huge success of themselves, which might put some other resentful ethnic groups into a rather bad light. And secondly, he said that this anti-historical attitude goes against everything that our industry says they stand for, in which sentence his grasp on the reality of Hollywood wokism seems just about as tenuous as his grasp on grammar. As for both, I shall merely remark that I'll bet he got the best education that Beverly Hills Unified School District had to offer. And that's the thing, though, because although the erasure of Jews is the most glaringly obvious, it wasn't only Jews who got wiped. It was Hollywood history altogether. Why the museum made such a polarizing move, says Rolling Stone, is a matter of debate and intrigue. Sources say a small contingent of influential Academy members pushed hard for non-white cinema to be highlighted and white contributions to be de-emphasized. A review of the exhibits would seem to support this notion. Japanese animator Hayao Miyazaki, for example, received a retrospective, while there was no similar treatment for the genre's godfather, Walt Disney. They completely ignored Walt Disney. That's just astonishing. And yet, with much ceremony, they gave their first Vanguard Award to an Ethiopian director called Haile Gerima, sorry, never heard of him, so I don't know how his name's pronounced, while at the same time not mentioning The Godfather. Not even once. As I said, This complete ignoring of Jews is just the symptom of a deeper illness, and we might diagnose it with this remark here. A source who is familiar with programming decisions says it was a battle no one was willing to fight, even if that meant a skewed overview of cinema history. A lot of people who might have fought harder for the representation of Jews were just really laying low, says the source. But as I say, it wasn't only Jews, was it? It was people like Walt Disney and Coppola. Notice that the person is kept anonymous and is just a source who is familiar with programming decisions. And what that unnamed interviewee is saying is that there are people who are worried about the way Hollywood is going, but they are too afraid to speak out. And that's what's happening. It's the slow tightening of the noose around Hollywood creativity. You will notice that I've been putting up, at least I intend to, I hope this works out, that I've been putting up shots from various movies throughout this presentation. So far as I know, they're all Hollywood productions, or at least productions facilitated by Hollywood companies. Lawrence of Arabia was a British film, for instance, but it was produced by Sam Spiegel. Oh, I suppose he's another American Jew, isn't he? And it was distributed by Columbia Pictures. And all these shots I've been putting in the background, they are all movies that I knew just from that one picture. If you ran a set of recent Hollywood clips past me, I wouldn't know one from the other. For goodness sake, in most cases, I can't tell one actor from the other, let alone one of their films. Now, back to my theory about why Rolling Stone left this story hanging about for 4 whole months. My guess is that it was a story they were afraid to publish at the time. And they've recently got the courage only when the protests gathered enough supporters and got loud enough to give Rolling Stone the idea that they could speak up without getting the tops of their heads shot off. I'm afraid it seems that Hollywood is doomed. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the Graniopteryx design or Granbo with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.graniopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share, share, share.